and welcome to another edition of Photographica. This is a little bit experimental because I'm recording it on my phone in an effort to make recording these easier and quicker to disseminate through the podcast. I haven't posted one for a bit, but I was inspired to by a recent association, not directly, but through a gallery that I work for, that I print for, the David Hill Gallery, and David Hill himself, a connection to the great Magnum photographer Ian Berry. I have been aware of him by reputation and his work that he did in South Africa. In particular, he was famous for his photographs of the Sharpeville massacre and his pictures resulted in the confirmation that the authorities had not shot all these people by accident, as they claimed, but deliberately. Ian Berry had very bravely stayed around Sharpeville during the fighting, during the shooting, and managed to take pictures which clearly showed policemen reloading their weapons in direct contradiction to their claims that it was an accident that resulted in so many deaths and injuries. But my more recent introduction to his work has been through his prints that were made for his book, The English. I was lucky enough to be shown a full set of the prints that Ian made in the 70s of his photographs that were in the book, and I was absolutely blown away by them. I mean, there were two reasons I was so excited by them. First of all, the pictures are exquisite, and they are just beautiful, sad, exquisitely balanced, perfectly sensitive, and everything that good documentary photography can aspire to be, because somebody like Ian Berry has the gift of being able to document something, but also to not shy away from the human aspect of it. The pictures which resulted in the book, the 1978 book that was published simultaneously by Penguin and who's the other and Alan Lane. Alan Lane published the hardback and Penguin published the paperback, was made possible by an Arts Council grant which he received in 1974. So there was, I think, a year of photography that he carried out, and then it took 4 years for the book to appear. Now, I'm not quite sure what accounted for the lengthy gap, but anyway, I was lucky enough to I bought a copy. Having seen the pictures, I bought a copy of the hardback and the softback. They're not very expensive, and you can find them quite easily secondhand. I mean, my copies aren't particularly in good condition, but they're good enough. But I was very lucky that in the softback edition, somebody had carefully folded a clipping from The Guardian dated Monday, June the 24th, 1974, which was a report by Andrew Hutton about Ian Berry's commission from or bursary from the Arts Council, and it features an interview with him and background about Ian Berry and his working environment, and which came the report was made or appeared in the Guardian shortly after he won the bursary, but before he started the photography. So I have absolutely no idea how. And then the book was published in 1978, 4 years later. So somehow, as I said, I don't understand how somebody was prescient enough to keep a copy of The Guardian for 4 years and make that clipping. But that's a mystery that will no doubt never be answered or understood. Anyway, I just wanted to draw your attention to this book because it really is incredible. I am looking at the short foreword that Ian has written, where he describes his motivation and his back and the sort of lead up to his to taking on this project. But he writes that one paragraph. Right, I'll read it. It says, "I will only add that England has changed," he writes, "less in the 15 years I was away than I thought. Or at any rate, what I photographed had changed less than I had expected. Also, England is the easiest country in the world in which to take photographs, in the way people react, or rather do not react, in the photographer's presence." Now, I'm amazed by that because I find England to be one of the hardest places to photograph in the world. I've photographed all over the world, and I don't think there's anywhere I've photographed, short of some fairly conservative Muslim towns in sort of in Morocco, where people are very sensitive to the. Sorry, that's just the dog barking at the postman, as he does every day pointlessly. But I find England incredibly difficult. I find people are very sensitive here to the camera, and I think that is a symptom of where we've come over the year. Where we've come with our relationship to the press, and so on. And I think that the time that Ian Berry was taking these pictures in, we had a great deal more trust in the press than we do now. I think anybody who is taking pictures now is either considered to be, on some sort of visceral level, a state sort of spy of some sponsored spy of some sort, or is a smutty press photographer trying to get salacious snaps. And the number of times that I've been accosted for taking pictures by people who sometimes weren't even in the frame. The number of times the police have come up to me to warn me off. The number of physical confrontations I've had with people over taking pictures leads me to feel a frisson of danger every time I step out onto a street or a public space where I'm trying to take pictures. So I don't recognise the world that Ian Berry speaks of in the foreword to his book. Ian is a consummate Magnum photographer in the sense that he has given his life to photography in a way that very few people have, and it's paid off. And I'm very interested in him because I've become increasingly aware that there's a great hole in the center of our appreciation of photography that it should be occupied by a revision, a review, a reaffirmation, if you like, of the value of English documentary photography. As Ian states in his Guardian interview of 1974, he says, "It's curious and sad that no major work of this kind," referring to his forthcoming assignment on England, "exists, even though one can easily remember similar bodies of work about France, Germany, the USA, and other countries. And that still remains the same, as far as I can tell. I mean, apart from Ian's book, and there have since been other works on the English by English photographers, such as, in fact, Tony Ray Jones predated Ian Berry with his book looking at the English at leisure, and since then there have been several books, Homer Sykes included, and obviously Martin Parr and so on, all looking at the English. But there is no sense or agglomeration or collection anywhere formally, either through a major exhibition that looks at English documentary photography. There was one in 2007 at the Tate Britain called How We Are, which was a show curated by Val Williams, and that was England through photography. But that's not the same thing as discussing or looking at the collected works of great British or English documentary photography. I think it's well over time, it's well overdue, I should say, that such a thing exists, and I hope that something will happen soon to redress that. And I'm personally going to do everything I can to make that happen. So looking at the English, the book, I suggest you look it up online to see the pictures in question. But what struck me about it when I saw the prints and then latterly saw the book was that there is a particular kind of English cultural view which is visible in the work of its best photographers. And Ian Berry's book is a perfect example of this. There is a tone to the English, and I think this is particularly evident right now during our protracted Brexit. What do you call it? Some would call it a disaster. I certainly would. But during our Brexit debacle, I'm at loss for words about what's happening about Brexit. But I think it does show. I think it throws England into some relief. And given that Scotland voted to remain on the whole, and England voted to leave on the whole, I think it shows a national characteristic up quite and throws it into sharp relief. I would actually think that was quite a good title for for an exhibition about English photography. Sharp relief is exactly what it's all about, and I hope we all are relieved when this Brexit situation finally resolves itself. But at the moment, we need to re-examine who we are as a people. And I think one of the benefits of this Brexit debate is that it has thrown up the cultural differences that make our island our country so distinctive. And it is with that in mind that as I look through these pictures of Ian Berry's, that you can see it. You can see the diffidence, the natural diffidence of the English person. You can see their stoicism. You can see the ability to put up with great hardship without much much hope being offered, yet life still somehow thriving in it. You can see the dim-lit, dark streets of northern England and still find a glimmer of hope in them. And the hope, I think, comes from a sort of sense of self-reliance that the English have come to feel, being an island nation or part of an island nation. And I think that it's deeply ingrained, that sort of intransigence, but yet intransigence that comes with a certain kind of adaptability at the same time, is all there in these pictures. There really are some extraordinary images, and I would really hope that you are able to see them in something like their original quality. I would say on a note that it's not surprising that the prints I've seen, which are electrifying, are so much better rendered than the prints in the book. But that's not surprising, in that the opportunities to print. I'm not sure how this was printed. I'm not sure if it's a duotone or so on. But the prints in the book are very good, but they don't have that electricity of the silver print, and all the tonality that is embodied within those original prints. I thought in the article, in the Guardian interview with Ian Berry, it's quite. I think there's a couple of quotes I pulled out which I thought were interesting, and there's something to think about, I suppose. He says on one. This is on the value of black and white to him. He says, if you're interested in form and content, it, i.e. colour, often detracts. And I thought that's quite a succinct way of valuing black and white at a time. He then goes on to mention things about colour which I don't think would be relevant now, such as it's the low ISO, which means that, the restrictions on being able to photograph and so on. So I think we've got over that. But he clearly makes the judgment that black and white is a way of retaining the content without distraction of the image that you're taking. He then, in mentioning his distaste of Bill Brandt's work, which I share, I'm not a fan of Bill Brandt, although some of his documentary photography I really enjoy, but on the whole I'm not so keen on what he's very famous for. And he says of Bill Brandt, if you're going to lose reality by playing about with the negative or whatever, then I'd rather paint it in the first place. And I think that's quite a nice way of summing up why straight photography, a photograph that is unmanipulated, but for an attempt to grade it, to tell the story of the image, is so interesting. And I think it puts the question of manipulation and alteration and cropping and so on in a neat frame, if you like. And that sort of leads me on to something else that I've been thinking about recently, which is the value of straight photography. If you go to any of the college, certainly the fine art degree, college photographic college shows, and you see the work that students are being encouraged to produce now and are being awarded degrees on and masters on, you'll see that quite a lot of it is almost the personification, the embodiment of the rejection of straight photography. It is finding a new language. It is finding a new way of working with lenses and light and time and so on, and some of it is really interesting and beautiful. But I think that there is an argument which needs to be put to bed for once and for all, and it's a little bit like the argument between digital and film. Straight photography, which is, as I say it, sticks in my throat because it seems to denigrate a form of photography, has been derided by not the journalistic colleges, but by the art world, as being something old hat and old-fashioned, and that the art world, is now interested not so much in the in what you might call a straight photograph, as in a conceptual photographic image, as you might find in some of the more the younger and more experimental galleries at Photo London, for example, or Frieze, which is now upon us. I love photography, and I've always loved straight photography. The books that I buy tend to be what you'd call straight photography, in the sense that they tend to be works of documentary, and I can see myself staying very happily within that sort of mode of photography. I do occasionally find things which I just love, which are on the conceptual side, and would always buy something that appealed to me visually, but it's straight photography which I adore, and which I aspire to contribute to in my own way. And it's this that I think that we've got confused about. We don't honour, we as a nation, I mean, and I'm speaking about I'm probably talking about London more than anything else, but I think as UK, we've sublimed from having no appreciation of photography to placing it in the sale rooms of Christie's and Phillips and Sotheby's and that's and so on, where it attracts, where some of the work by some sort of more, let's say, conceptual photographers or artists working in the photographic medium attracts huge prices, and this locks that sort of work into the vortex or the cycle of collectors' money and the gallery system, which all feed off each other at the upper end, and then below that, if you like, although next to that, I would say, is what you call straight photography. Now, many amateur practitioners have jumped on this band because straight photography is so much more approachable, accessible as in a practical sense than the photography than conceptual photography, and that's just one reason. The other reason is that people are inspired by their photographic heroes: Robert Capa, Cartier-Bresson, Ian Barry, and so on. And anybody can walk out onto the street and take a picture. That is not to say that everybody is potentially an Ian Barry or one of my favourites, James Revilius, because it's about commitment. And I think that what's happened is that the straight photography has been diluted by the amateurs who come into it, who are producing not great work and sharing it on Instagram and so on, without any commitment. And there's an awful lot of photography that shows no commitment. And I'm not talking about a commitment to risking your life and limb, or risking, although commitment may lead you to do that. I'm talking about the sort of commitment that requires time and dedication, and not just occasional snappery. It is a myth that people that perpetuates that people like the great photographers like Cartier-Bresson just always had a camera on them and just took the odd casual shot whenever it suited them. This just isn't true. They did always have a camera on them, but they were working photojournalists who were working too hard to get to stories and to report on situations and to tell stories that nobody else was telling, sometimes exciting, sometimes mundane. And in the course of the pursuit of that work, they took some very beautiful pictures, but their primary motive was to discover and to show their discoveries to the rest of the world. They were not just people, flaneurs, who spent their time with cameras around their shoulders, their necks, hanging outside cafes, although they certainly spent much time doing this, but taking pictures of anything that happened on the street as they happened to be that happened in front of them. There was the value of their work, the true value of their work, came through the commitment that they placed in the projects that they pursued. And I think that in the UK we have got confused. We have let ourselves get confused between the great work of committed documentary photographers or documenting photographers and the less prepossessing work of the casual artist, if you like, or the casual snapper. And it has diluted the marketplace or the environment, it's taken away the imperative from this media, from this genre, and left us with a sort of woolly, grey view in general of this kind of what's so-called straight photography, and allowed this kind of photography to sink into a sort of subcategory of pro-am art, and I think that is completely wrong. I think that is wrong. I think that there is still, in fact, there is a greater need now for the committed photographer to tell their story than there ever was at any time in the past. And I'm not just talking about people who tell the story of, say, a very grand story of, say, the English, which is a big, which is a very big project. But I'm also referring to photographers such as Paddy Summerfield, who, in his book Mother and Father, described his relationship with his parents and their descent into dementia in the most beautiful and poetic way. His new book, or his latest book, I should say, is called Empty Days, and again is a look back and a documenting of his visual life, and in his foreword he says, "This is what I believe," as a way of introducing his pictures, and it's incredibly brave because and it's required decades of work, and it's required the attention and the energy to put those images into a form that can be shown and rated and held by people who are so interested or are so inclined to buy those sort of books. So I feel that what we've got here right now is a value, a poor valuation of photography, and that needs to be redressed, and it needs to be redressed through a major exhibition and catalogue of British, or more specifically, and I think more easily told, through English documentary photography that asserts the value of English photography. I don't want to go on about this all the time, but I do want to say that the English, okay, the French invented the medium, let's give them credit for that, but it was the English who made it work. It was the English who inspired Alfred Stieglitz to go back to America and start his whole movement, which became a form of contemporary art in America. It was the English, through Fox Talbot, who managed to fix an image on a piece of paper and multiply it many, many times. You know, it was pioneering photography. British photographers such as Fenton and Julia Margaret Cameron, who popularized the idea of photography as an artistic medium and a reporting medium. So we have probably the richest history and the deepest history in photography, yet we've ceded it to the rest of the world. And I've heard that said about us in terms of technology that we develop. We develop amazing technology, but it's the rest of the world that actually profits from it. And I think exactly the same thing can be said of British British photography as a whole, and in particular English photography. Now I know people will take exception, and I will hear from people who will talk about Scottish photography, Irish photography, and Welsh photography. But it is in this time but it is a fact that there's a greater body of work by English photographers looking at the English than there are of any other nation in the United Kingdom, and I think that there would be more mileage in honing in on one of the countries, although I could be wrong, rather than spreading it and making it an examination of Great Britain as a whole. I think that these things are often better dealt with in concentrated form. So, without more ado, I'm going to sign off now, because hopefully this is recorded and hopefully this is somewhat coherent. I'd be delighted to hear from you, as ever. I will be trying to do more of these now, because I want to make the recording of these Photographica podcasts so much easier, and to fit into the schedule of my day job, printing for various photographers and galleries all over the world, and as I love doing these so much. But please, if you take umbrage at anything I've said, or you agree with me, I'd love to hear from you. And I hope, I would love to hear from you soon, and hopefully you will hear from me soon as well. So thanks very much for listening to Photographica. I'm Alex Schneiderman, and see you next time.